All right, now this should be interesting. A little tier list of video games. Now, the idea behind this is that I always wanted to like talk in depth about games that I have played because I love video games. I want to make video games, and I like sharing my insight or my view on them. But I cannot be bothered to go through the effort of writing a script because if I don't write a script for a video, then I just go on fucking 7 minute long tangents that don't even mean anything. So instead of doing either one of those, I'm just gonna provide like one or two sentences on what I think about each of these games, uh, and just put them in a category. Now, the categories I want to clarify a little bit. Best category is this one because I think it's just a really good game and you're denying yourself a good time by not playing it. This is kind of just the second tier is like it's kind of like a goodish tier. It's not necessarily like really good, but it's good enough that it warrants a replay every now and then. Mid kind of speaks for itself. It's just it's whatever. It's a video game. You can waste your time with it if you want. It's pretty fun on some aspects, not fun on others. Fun time waster is not necessarily bad. It kind of falls into the category of one of those games you play while putting on a podcast or just listening to something else in general. So you're doing something while listening to something. It's one of those. So it's not that it's a bad game per se, but it doesn't grab your attention well enough to actually fully pay attention to it. And shit game is just a shit game. I don't like it at all. I fundamentally dislike it. All right, let's start off with Alien Isolation. Um, Probably fun to play every once in a while. It is really cool in the sense that the main enemy, the alien, has a really clever AI, but at the same time, it's very easy to even to cheese it, even if you don't mean to. And there's sections that I dislike because I think it's kind of boring. And besides the alien, every other AI is kind of brain dead or fucking stupid. The difficulties, besides normal, are kind of either stupidly easy or stupidly hard. So yeah, it's a fun play, and I have replayed it quite a few times, so there is something to it. But yeah, it's fun enough to play every once in a while. Blasphemous is a game I'm really angry with because I originally liked it a lot from due to how cool the visuals look. It has really good visuals, I'll give it that. But the gameplay is absolute fucking shit. I played through everything it has to offer. So hell, I think I did it even multiple times, but I would still say it's a shit game because instead of like a fun to replay in a while or mid, because it's the problem is everything is really unsatisfying. The way the levels are designed are a little bullshit. Well, okay, it's a Souls like, so that's expected, but what I mean by bullshit is kind of badly designed. It's the actual bosses itself are unsatisfying health sponges that have very easy fucking patterns. They aren't very hard. They just test more of your mental like strength because of how fucking spongy they are. Music is kind of nothing. Besides its visuals, the game doesn't have much to offer. Is what I if I have to put it in one sentence. The core gameplay is not very good. The bosses look cool sometimes, but never really. There's only like two bosses in the entire game that are kind of fun, and only because they actually make use of the parry mechanic. And even then, they aren't exactly really good bosses. So yeah, maybe if you're really bored, give it a go. But I can guarantee you that you'll probably won't stick with it. I'm disappointed more than angry at this game, but I'm also really angry. Celeste, straight up one of the best games ever. I love Celeste. Really fun mechanics. Has a lot of levels, a lot of really fucking hard levels. Some of the hardest platforming I ever done in my entire fucking life, and yeah, they outdo that one section Hollow Knight with the many spikes and shit. That one secret thing, whatever. You probably don't know what I'm on about. Uh, TLDR, really good gameplay loop. Visuals are awesome. Has really fun story. Not super special, but unique of a story. I like all the characters. I like the plots. I like the levels. I like the challenge. Um, the only real problem I have with it that it doesn't have many proper boss battles. I think in the entire game, there's maybe like one boss battle that I would classify as a boss battle. Technically, there are like at least three, I think, but I wouldn't classify two of those as a boss, really. Whatever, it doesn't matter. It's a good game. Play it. It's fun. It's awesome. It's a good time, and it is. However, I discourage you to go at it if you aren't gonna stick with it, because it's a really fucking hard game, and you don't really get to experience the entire story unless you do all of the hardest levels. And I do implore you to go through the hard levels because it's fun. It's very satisfying once you got it. All right, moving on. DMC5. Now, if you know me, if you're friends with me, you probably expected this one. Because I never shut the fuck up about this game. This is one of the few games I never shut up about. DMC5 is really fun. I do have. I played the game enough to realize its weaknesses in the gameplay area. But even with that, it's one of the games I most played ever. Like, I replayed this game at least 20 times from beginning to end. And yeah, it's a fun gameplay loop. The story is one of those games where you kind of just watch the cutscenes and have fun with it. The story is not important that really. Many bosses, some better than others. The final boss is really cool. You play as three characters. Two of them play insanely fun. One of them play insanely shit. Thankfully, though, you don't play as much with that character if you don't want to. Maybe like 4 levels. I don't know. But all in all, you can have a lot of fun with this game. I sure did, and it's worth a try at least. I think you'll like it if you like third-person action games. Doom Eternal. Uh, it's either mid or fun to play. I'd say this is a bit of a hard one because I played it only on console. I don't have the PC power enough to play it on PC. But even if I played on PC, I would still be conflicted. Just because I'm. So, one thing that's worth knowing about me for this, I don't really like hyper fast paced games. Like, I like games that are relatively fast paced when it comes to combat, so that it's fun and it flows well. But games like Doom Eternal or Ultra Kill or any of these boomer shooters, they're a little bit too annoyingly fast for me. I feel like it's more just pure reaction time and nothing else. And while I can see the fun behind it, it's not exactly my jam. And that coupled with FPSs, which are already something I don't really like, is a bit of a hard sell. But I'm willing to recognize that the gameplay loop is fun. Uh, if not a little bit easy to cheese. Even on console, if you just go double shotgun, you will pretty much just mow through all the enemies easily. You don't really need to switch all of the weapons. Most of the weapons are pretty useless. As long as you have the double shotgun strategy down, you'll be fine. But yeah, it's a fun time, but it's definitely one of those games I replay like maybe once or twice a year, and that's it. like from like just go through the story and I leave it at that. DLC for it is pretty fun. I won't implore you to buy it unless it's on a discount though, because I think the two DLCs together are like 40 quid, which is like a little too much for basically three levels that are like an hour long each. I don't know. Whatever, I'm getting off track. Elden Ring, shit game. I will be heavily disagreed on, and fine. I'm fine with that. If you for the record, if I think it's a shit game, that's one thing. If you enjoyed the game, good on you. I'm happy for you. If you like Blasphemous, good on you. If you like Elden Ring, good on you. I personally fucking hated Elden Ring, cause for one, I will admit I didn't finish this one, and there's a few of these games I don't think I finished properly. But I'm never planning to finish the game, so I might as well comment on it. I don't like. I fundamentally disagree with the way From Software decided to tackle Elden Ring. I'm not discouraging their experimentation with the Souls formula, but I don't think this is the right one. What I always liked about the Souls games, not Souls like the Souls games, is how you are basically forced to move through level by level, and you cannot proceed until you defeat a boss because it's basically a skill check to if you're skilled enough to go into the next area. And I always like that. That's the one thing I kind of like, that you kind of have to go through this trial by fire situation where you have to learn all the patterns and dodge around and know when to hit, whatever. What I don't like about Elden Ring is that it's open world. I already have a heavy distaste for open world games because of how fucking boring they are. So even before it released, I was kind of wary of it because I knew I will probably not like it. And it came out and I played it and I was like, oh man, this shit sucks. What I really hated is that I hated not being able to defeat a boss that I see. I really hate that about open world games. I hate it about pretty much any game. If you show me a boss, then I'm able to, well, I have the option to beat it, but I physically cannot beat it, and not because of skill, but because of a fucking stat. I don't like that shit. I prefer to just do the boss instead of having to remember this fuckhead that beat me up 17 times like 8 hours late in the game. I don't know. It's I just don't like that gameplay structure of having to go somewhere else because you're too low level. I feel like it takes me out of the experience and it's not very fun. So yeah, I just hate it. Sorry, but if you like it, that's fine. Now for Lone Sales, I this is a weird one because I liked it a lot, but I'm willing to admit that it's kind of a mid game. It's basically a move. Basically, you're just using this car thing. It's like a post-apocalyptic car-looking thing, where you are trying to just constantly move to the right. It's like a kind of like a 2D scroller. Um, but you're basically managing resources, putting out fires, and basically trying to keep the car so that it's chugging along constantly. And I liked it a lot because of how atmospheric it was, and I don't know, there was some beautiful simplicity in your objective of just uh, basically making sure your car works. Like there are scripted events where stuff sometimes breaks and you have to go through this small level to replace the wheels to like with a better one and stuff like that. But I can really easily see how many people would find it extremely fucking boring. And yeah, it's it's not exactly a fun time waster. It's more enjoyable if you're fully paying attention to it. But it's a time waster in the sense that it's a very slow game. It's a very slow atmospheric game where you're kind of just enjoying the sights and the sounds. So if you're into that sort of shit, then yeah, it's a very very enjoyable experience. I liked it a lot. Didn't enjoy its sequel as much, but really like this one. It has a lot of cool moments. It's very serene. So yeah, the Final Fantasy remake. Uh, I'd say fun to play every once in a while. I played the original Final Fantasy 7 and I played the remake and I like the remake better, but I'm willing to admit that it also fucked up a lot of things. Just because I like it better doesn't mean I'm blind to its weaknesses. So, I actually there's not many RPGs that I really fucking like. There's like maybe 4 and this is one of them. Cause I think what RPGs really don't understand is the main combat has to be really fucking good because you're gonna be playing it for like the next 60 hours. And the original Final Fantasy VII understood that, and the combat was really solid. So the switch to live action is a bit jarring, and the main gameplay loop doesn't quite work. Problem is with the main combat of the remake is one, you're playing as 4 characters and only 2 of them are fun to play as. And coincidentally, those 2 characters are the only characters that are close ranged, like fighters, like Tifa and Cloud. Barrett and Aerith play like shit because their projectiles feel like fucking pellets you're throwing at this giant machination. So yeah, it's not very fun. And I'm not gonna go into the whole combat loop, but basically, there's just very little things in the combat loop that just annoys me, and I feel like could have been better and improved the overall flow of the game. Story wise, I mean, it's a fucking anime plot. What do you want? It's like it's serviceable. It's a serviceable enough game and plot. It's fun. If you kind of just like ignore the illogicalness of the world and just have fun with it, if you just enjoy the ride, then you have a good time. It is a little slow at times. Like there's nothing really to break up the combat besides like story stuff, and the story stuff is not the best. So there's stuff to like, there's stuff to dislike. The bosses are fucking awesome, some of the best bosses ever, really good. The main combat itself kind of gets tired. If it's not a boss, you kind of don't want to play the main combat loop, basically. But yeah, I feel like I'm kind of just start ranting, so I'll move on instead. Fury. Now, some of these are in the game, so you might not heard of them. Fury is like, I guess I would say it's a Souls like. Um, it's God. Fury is a hard one to categorize because it's really hard, like a Souls like, but it's also kind of like a bullet hell shooter and this weird like fencing game at the same time. So I like Fury, but I really dislike some of its parts. So I think I'll put it at mid because it's not a game I found myself replaying a whole lot. So it is really good. It's basically just on like a boss rush. Like the entire game is just a boss rush. You only fight bosses. The bosses themselves are all really unique. I'll give it that, and all are really fucking hard. Except maybe like the tutorial, but that's to be expected. And yeah, that's pretty much it. The combat has its is fun enough. The combat loop is pretty cool, but it can be a little bit annoying at times. Honestly, it's hard to put it into words because of how it basically has like 2 gameplay styles just mashed together well enough, I admit. But yeah, it's It's worth a play, but it's not worth a replay, is what I would say. Okay, now this one's a bit of an odd one out because it's technically a multiplayer game. Guilty Gear Strive. Now, this is one of my all-time favorite games ever, because this is the only fighting game that I actually really fucking liked, and to the point that I got good at it. um, so yeah, there's not much to say about this one besides that it's really good. The characters are relatively well balanced, I would say. There's some characters that are a little bit more bullshit than others, I will say, but hopefully everything will be balanced enough over time, and even if not, you can still have a lot of fun with it. Uh, its story mode is basically a 4 hour movie, so only watch that if you're like bored and I don't know, don't have anything to watch at the moment. Characters really fun, unique, music fucking slaps. Uh, the online features are a little wonky. I find myself getting disconnected or not being able to connect a lot, so that's a fucking nuisance. But if you can put up with it, then you'll have a good time. I like the game a lot. Hop on it, give the developers some love, because this game is heavily underrated. It's such a good fighting game. Try it at least. Try it. That's all I say. God of War Ragnarok, but for me it's gonna be God of War 2 because it's the second game I ever played. I'm gonna say mid. The story is well written enough, and since it's a very story heavy game, that's important. I feel like it lost a lot of focus compared to the first like God of War like continuation trilogy thing. So compared to its predecessor, it's a lot less focused on plot, but it's still really well written, so you can kind of just brush that off easily. The combat, well, the combat sucks. Sucks? No, sucks. And the problem is, I felt like they didn't make any improvements on the combat compared to its predecessor, which was just called God of War. So I'll just call it God of War. Um, I never liked the combat in the God of War either, because it felt a little unsatisfying because of the RPG mechanics. Your hits either your hits always I think it's something to do with the animation or the thing or just how things sound or something, but hitting enemies doesn't feel very satisfying. I feel like, or maybe it's just that how many hits it takes to kill just normal enemies that overall makes it feel less satisfying. It's kind of important too, because that's the only other thing you can do besides listen to the story is combat, and the combat is not very interesting, and there's not many bosses. And I'm not. God of War 2 tries to trick you by saying it has many bosses. It doesn't have many bosses. It has a many mini bosses, which are different. Mini bosses are little harder enemies that kind of fuck with you for like 2 seconds and then they fuck off because you killed them. Bosses are like a 5 minute trial of fucking fire. But it pretends that the mini bosses are bosses, so whatever. I just. Okay, look, this is a long video for me. Look how much fucking things I have to comment on still. God of War 2, too much boring shit. Combat not very fun, but it's worth a single play, I will say. That's all I can really say for it. Gotham Knights. Now, this was a game I was really excited for. I kind of realized before release that it's not gonna be good, but I wanted to play through it regardless because I was excited for it, so I might as well, waste my time a little bit. Overall, I would say I want to say it's a fun time waster, but it's not. It's really not. It's a shit game. I have to say it's just the story isn't good. Not even good enough to the point where you can just have fun with how dumb it's being. It's just kind of disappointing. That's actually the perfect word for it. It's disappointing. Like every part of it is not bad, but disappointing because it has all the makings, all the like the it has a good idea, but does such a bad execution on everything, like story, gameplay, every fucking thing. So it's just a really disappointing game. Hollow Knight, fucking best game, probably the king of these games so far. Hollow Knight is one of the first really hard games I ever played. I think, and it's a good one too. If you play a lot of Souls-like games, it won't be as hard for you as it was for me, but it's still a pretty difficult game. It's also has really good art direction. It's kind of has a Metroidvania kind of vibe going on, where you revisit places, unlock more shit as you like move through the world and progress. It's a really good game. Has plenty of secrets. Has plenty of really hard challenges, bosses, levels, areas. Bunch of good stuff. Bunch of really good stuff, coupled with really good atmosphere and beautifully orchestrated music. Do yourself a favor and play it. Seriously, it's. I don't even really want to say too much about it, cause it spoils all the goodness. You know, like it has so many levels and areas and fun stuff you can do. The combat is really fun. There's huge enemy variety. You get a bunch of really cool abilities you can make use of. You get a bunch of really hard and difficult and tough platforming challenges. So yeah, play it. It's a fun time. Starts out a little slow, I will admit that, but once you gain momentum, it's a really fun game. Helltaker, I decided to put Helltaker here. Um, Now I like Helltaker a lot. It's one of those games that it knows that it's basically like a 30-minute game at best, because it's just a quick little like puzzle game basically. So but it has such good music. It has really good writing and style. It's very stylistic. Um, Weirdly enough, it has insanely good bosses. Like some of the best bosses I ever played. Like the boss of the main game and the DLC are both really fucking good and difficult and just has really awesome music. It's basically just a comedy game, so you have a fun time with it. It's also really difficult on the puzzles, so it's a fun little head scratcher. So that's cool. Uh, there's I pretty much said all I could really say with this one as well. This is a game that's only shortcomings are that it's how short it is. Like I honestly would pay much more money for a much longer game. Straight up. It's kind of it's a little bit sad. It doesn't have very a lot of content. It has the main game. There was a DLC that released like a couple of years back, and that's all. But yeah, the Count Lucanor. Now, this is a game I haven't finished yet, but I played a lot of. Like, I think I probably got it at least 60% of the way through. It's kind of a horror game. It's I don't know. It's an indie developed game, not company game. um, it's it's good. I don't want to sound like I'm making that it's not a good game. The problem is it's a badly paced game. The character moves way too slowly uh, for the game. It's just too slow. It's too slow, and it's really just as simple as your character moves too slowly. I think the developers did it to just to extend time gameplay, like overall gameplay a little bit, because the actual castle that you're in isn't very big. Like there are a lot of rooms, but none of them are very big, so it's kind of a small play area you go in. So they decide to give you slower walking speed, but there's a lot of puzzles. Some of them better than others. Like some of them are a little too fucking obscure to understand what you're supposed to do. But besides those ones, the puzzles are fun. If not a little simple, it's either a little simple or a little too bullshit. But usually there's a good balance of both. Uh, yeah, it's just a good enough horror game. It's not very scary, but it's scary enough that it'll spook you a little bit. And the gameplay mechanics are fun. It's well written, cool, stylish. Like it also looks cool. It's very stylish. Okay, jeez, I have to get a drink. Uh, oh shit, that's much better. Okay, Nier Automata. Now, this is a game that I'm extremely conflicted with, because it's a game that, by all accounts, I should love to the core, but I don't, and only because of the story, which is a little bit shitty and petty of me, but I do feel like it's valid. So I'll go into spoiler territory because I really wanna just go into why I'm conflicted with this game. So my non-spoiler review is go and play it, but with low expectations. And if you do that, you should be really not low expectations of the story, but not the gameplay. I'll put it that way, and you'll have a wonderful time with it. So I actually ended up liking originally this game a lot. The gameplay is really fucking good, and the story was good enough that I cared. I cared about its characters. I cared about its world. I wanted to see what would happen. I hoped that everything would end with a happy note. Excuse me. But problem is, around halfway through the game, it kills the main protagonist and replaces it with this chick who killed the character you were playing as. And while it makes sense, so it's not like an antagonistic move per se that your character gets killed. It's more like an necessity because an infection or whatever. You just play the fucking game if you want to know the details. But the problem is that I cared about that character, but I didn't care as the character you get replaced with. Mainly because you interact with her like fucking once in the entire game, and when you do, it's in like this boss battle. So it's kind of annoying that everything around the midway point just turns to this really bleak and depressing tone where pretty much every character you come to care about just fucking dies. Like it's just and it made me sad. It made me upset because it's not even necessarily that it has a bleak ending. Fine, whatever, artistic choice, I can live with it. But it's really just the way your character gets killed that kind of pisses me off, because it's just it feels a little lazy. It feels a little derivative. Whatever. Ignoring that, the gameplay is insanely fun. Okay, I there's the final boss of the game is hands down to this day might be the best boss fight I played. Period. Like, I'm a big fan of Spider-Man. I love the Spider-Man games a whole lot. I love Marvel Spider-Man, and as you can see, Marvel's Ultimate Spider-Man is my favorite game of all time. But I'm willing to admit that Nier Automata's final boss might be the best boss fight I've ever fucking played, because it has this insanely good segment at the end where you play as two characters throughout the entire game. So in the final boss, you're basically fighting these two robots, and it constantly like very without like a loading screen, like it's like it fluidly just switches transitions into the other character as they're fighting their robot. It's hard to explain, but it's basically switches between characters and play styles constantly, like back and forth, in a way that is so satisfying and so perfectly done that it might be just the best boss fight ever. And shit like that is why I feel like it should be a game that I really love, but I just don't. I just don't because of the story. It makes me sad and annoyed with it. But yeah, it has a lot of moments like that. I don't think a single boss in Nier Automata isn't one of the fucking best bosses ever. And especially the final boss, which is just might be a fucking masterpiece of video game design regarding bosses. So yeah, if you can make peace with the story's like annoyance, it's definitely a game you will probably see yourself either replaying constantly or replaying every once in a while. So yeah, it's a good game. I just don't really like its story too much, which causes me to detract a lot of points from it. Omori. Now this is a more recent game I played. Not too recent. I think it's been a while since I finished it. I liked it a lot. It's one of those RPGs that I really liked. One of the four, I think, and it's in an interesting spot. Whereas in where on retrospection, there should be a lot of stuff here that I either don't really give a fuck about or dislike. But when as I was playing it, I liked it. So the combat, for example, it's not very deep. It's not very good, but it works well enough. Like it kind of does the Persona 5 thing where you can string together multiple attacks with different characters. But it doesn't do it as well as Persona 5 because I'm not going to go into the gameplay loop. It feels like the combat itself is a little short on ideas, or it does a bad job of executing its main idea. While the story itself, it's also a very story heavy game. The story itself is good. It's really good up until the end, and that's up for debate. I'm not going to spoil the end because I really think you should play it for yourself. It has a really good story. It will get you engrossed in. It's a fun time, if not a little depressing at times. But its ending left me wanting. It left a bit of a sour taste. It felt a little unsatisfying, and I think it's on purpose. So in that sense, I'm willing to recognize that it's an artistic choice, and I respect it. But I don't necessarily agree with it. But at the same time, I understand it, as in, like, I don't have a solution for a better ending either, is what I'm trying to get at. That I don't feel like the ending was good, but I cannot come up with a better solution either. So take that as you will. I don't want to go into spoilers, so this entire rant makes no fucking sense whatsoever. Overall, um, well, I wouldn't say it's fun to replay. I wouldn't say it's mid. Um, Actually, I would say do yourself a favor and play it because its story is really good, and the combat is fun, and it has a lot of insanely good bosses and really fun bosses as well. Like they're fun and really good. They're cool little boss characters. They're fun. You fight a loading screen at some point, so that should give you a good idea of how fun the bosses are. So yeah, now this is a really niche one. I don't think there's many people who will even know this one. I haven't even heard this one for myself for the longest time. Paradise Killer. This is a really good game, but it's not really a game. It's the problem. Basically, there's no combat whatsoever. You basically play as a. It's like this really. You're in this really surreal world. Uh, Playing as a detective trying to solve like a big murder, and you go around interrogating people and looking for clues and shit, and it's kind of an artistic flex is also how I would describe it, because they basically created this large open world to explore. And honestly, this is the first open world maybe ever where I'm really wanted better traversal mechanics because of how unique and intriguing the world they created was. Basically, there's like little it's maybe like 12-ish areas on the in this open world that kind of seamlessly transition into one another, and each one is so unique looking and beautiful and colorful that it just blew my mind away. And I think they came out with a recent version where they now have 60 FPS and ray tracing and all that good shit, so it looks even better than before. The story itself, the like the mystery you have to solve isn't like really obvious, but I kind of guessed what happened around halfway through, so it's not like the most hardest to deduce plot either. I'm not gonna spoil it, but it's a fun one play. This is a game you will not replay. Trust me on that. I practically 100%ed the damn thing. It's You're not gonna replay it. It's too long of a game because you move just slow enough with your character that you play it once and never want to replay it again because of how fucking long it would take to replay all of it, or even just the main part of it. So yeah, if you don't mind like a non-combat-y, just talking dialogue, looking around game, then this should be fun. It should be really fun actually. It's a very unique world. I'll give it that. It's one of the most uniquest worlds ever created. Pizza Tower. This is a very recent, like I think it's a very recent game that came out. I really liked it. I'm a little torn between these two because I wouldn't say. Actually, no, no. I think it's a really good game and you should play it. Um, it the general levels kind of fluctuate for me personally in terms of how good they are. Like some of the levels, a bit of a miss for me. Some of the levels are a definite hit. But what I will say with complete sureness is every boss fight is really fucking good. Boss fights for me are really important, and this game nails it completely. It understands what a boss fight is. It understands how flashy and fun and difficult it has to be, and it's exactly that. The final boss of this game is really fucking good. The core gameplay itself is good-ish. I technically it's good, but I do feel like many people will not be as good at it as the game thinks you should be. It's hard to explain. Okay, the, I'll just move on and say good gameplay. You might not like it that much, but it is good. Bosses are good. It's an overall really good game. Play it for yourself. It's very unique. RE4 remake. I liked it a lot. I really did. I'm a big Resident Evil fan ever since 8. That's my all-time favorite Resident Evil game and one of my all-time favorite games ever. So I was actually pretty excited for the RE4 remake because I really dislike the original RE4. I haven't played it, and I dislike it, and I'm willing to agree that maybe that kind of negates my point of disliking the game, but regardless, I'm getting a little bit tired now, so I think I'll wrap up these games and then move on. RE4, fun combat, feels a little sluggish at first, but you'll kind of understand how the main combat flows after a while, and then it just clicks and it becomes really fun. There are points in the game that I really hated and I felt was kind of badly designed, but overall, all in all, really solid game. Does take a very serious tone instead of a very comical tone compared to the first one, or original one, should I say. But I kind of like this better. It is meant to be a horror game and not a comedy game, so I kind of am okay with changing the tone. So yeah, if you're a fan of the original, you'll probably like it. I don't. Yeah, if you aren't a big fan of the original, then you'll surefirely like it. You'll really like it, I think. Resident Evil 7. I think this is a mid game, which is weird because it's the Resident Evil 8 is gonna be in the highest tier, but Resident Evil 7, I actually replayed it recently, and it's a weird one because there's stuff there that is really fucking good, but there's also stuff there that is so fucking bad. Basically, the main combat loop is kind of fucking awful. However, there's also stuff here that is genuinely terrifying. Okay, so I'll give you two examples. Let's go with the good stuff, terrifying stuff. Very early on, you're introduced to the tyrant like enemy, this enemy that is unkillable and will relentlessly chase you, Jack Baker. One of the most scariest motherfuckers in video game history as far as I'm concerned. I played RE2 a lot, and while the fucking Mr. X is scary, he's nothing compared to Jack Baker. The fucking footsteps that speed up the longer he chases you, and it's so loud and so menacing, and he can fuck you up with just a couple of hits. He's a really scary dude, and that's a really cool part because he's just easy enough to dodge, but just threatening enough to make you panic. Now, an example that showcases the parts I dislike, I really hate the fucking enemies in this game because your ammo is more limited than in 8 because it takes a more horror tone than an action tone. I'm fine with that, but I expect you to balance your enemies accordingly. Now, the problem is, pretty much every single enemy in the game can kill you with maybe like 3 or 4 hits. You get some health upgrades later on. I implore you that you get it over the reload speed upgrades. Trust me, you'll thank me. But even then, there's this very specific enemy type that can basically one-hit you. Now, okay, admittedly, they balance this shit by making the stronger enemies easier to kill, with maybe the exception of one, and the weaker enemies harder to kill. That's fine. That makes sense. That's good game design, honestly. Problem is, you're supposed to aim for the head. If you aim basically anywhere else, you're fucked. It won't do shit. But the aiming is like, it's not even the aiming, it's the movement of the enemies. Basically, you're fighting mold. Don't question it. So it's basically just black mold you're fighting, but the way they move is it's too hard to aim at, and it's too hard. It's an enemy design that is very hard to look at in contrast to the environment. So you kind of, and the way they move is that they always try to rush you because they can only melee you. But that gives the problem of them moving a little too quickly, so you panic fire, or some fucking how you miss like 7 times. And this, it kind of, and I mentioned before, you don't get as much ammo as an 8, so if you wasted all those shots, you're fucked, basically. So, yeah, it's just not very satisfying. Moment to moment is a little, it's more annoying than fun. Yeah, there's stuff to like, stuff to dislike. Play it once, don't bother playing twice. Don't bother. It's like one of those few games where I didn't really care for all the extra shit you can unlock. Resident Evil 8, like I mentioned, one of my all-time favorites. It basically does everything that Resident Evil 7 did wrong right. Really good, like moment-to-moment gameplay. Really satisfying headshots. I feel like that gets its own like fucking category. The headshots in that game just really cool and fun. Their heads like blow up and it's really like satisfying. Enemy designs are cooler. Enemy AI is also a lot less bullshit. They sometimes like bum rush you, like they like fucking push other enemies away and they just make a beeline towards you, and if you don't get those guys, you'll get like basically like locked in animation get hurt, so you have to make those guys priority. There's ranged enemies, there's close and ranged enemies, there's hard to kill enemies. Um, each of them looks unique and have unique ways of killing them. There's a lot of cool bosses that are really fun. Uh, Puzzles are easy, but admittedly, most of these modern Resident Evil games, puzzles are fucking made for babies. How easy they are. Like, I kind of wish they would have made these puzzles a lot harder, like in Resident Evil 1. Um, but yeah, it's really its main the core gameplay that is really good in 8. Uh, the story is not very good. Like the writing for the story, it's kind of, I'm sure you saw the memes of it or something, or just heard of it at least, that the writing is kind of dog shit. I didn't notice it, but I don't notice most things until I like, properly think about them. But you should have fun with it. It's a fun game. It's just it is. It doesn't have many like weaknesses. It has some cool DLC that you can buy, but it's kind of weak compared to 7. I will give it that. And yeah, play it. Have fun with it. It should be a good time as far as I'm concerned. Sifu. Sifu is a really good one. I was really blown away by the main combat of this game. You parry and dodge, and those are your only defense mechanics. You can kind of space yourself, but not exactly a good defense mechanic. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm a little tired. I kind of just want to ramble at this point. I'm actively have to stop myself from rambling now. The story is non-existent. Basically, it's a really fucking predictable revenge plot where you're gonna revenge, but it turns out revenge is bad, and to get the good ending, you have to spare all the enemies, but in a way that you would never figure out without a fucking YouTube video. Trust me, I had to. But ignoring all that boring shit, it's actually really good. It has like maybe like 5 enemy types. There's regular enemies. It doesn't have more than 10. I think it has like 6 or 7 enemy types, but it does a really good job of mixing them together in a way that's difficult but fair. The main combat loop is really cool, because the dodges are really satisfying to do, and so are the parries. While the dodges give you a better chance to like just fucking hit them, counters will allow you to basically insta kill them better. Like if you do enough counters, their like stagger bar goes down enough that you can just instantly kill them. Otherwise, you can just punch them. It's fun. Animation is good. It's an extremely stylish game. Every single level is incredibly unique, and tries to stick to one color, or at least a very limited use of color, but does so much with that. And it's kind of just like the Ghost of Tsushima thing, where it has like a theme around one color, and it's a very artistic game. Okay, that's what I'm trying to get at. All right, I'm not a fucking thesaurus. I don't know how to express it perfectly, but I'm trying to think. To be fair, it's kind of impossible to express what I'm trying to think anyways, but you get what I'm trying to say. Let's move on. Good game, worth a lot of replays, worth completing the extra challenges, but do not try the hard mode, because the hard mode of this game is absolute fucking dog shit. Alright, Signalis. I like Signalis. It's a really fun game. It's kind of those back to basics kind of horror game where it is deliberately going out of its way to with its mechanics to be like Resident Evil 1, where you have limited inventory, enemies are fucking bastards that refuse to die, and Jesus Christ, excuse me, I don't know what's going on with my internals. it's really it's actually a really scary game in the sense that you never know what's gonna happen next. It takes a lot of inspiration from Lovecraftian horror, especially the King in Yellow, which is really cool. So yeah, I actually had a really fun time with this game. The only nuisance I can see being kind of a deal breaker is the amount of fucking backtracking you have to do. Since it goes to the like extreme lengths to replicate that RE1 feeling, it means that ammo and the gun each individually cost an inventory space, and you can only have like 6 inventory slots. And a flashlight is a fucking inventory spot. A healing item is, and gun is. Key items are. So you'll be doing a lot of backtracking. Another thing is that the enemies are deceptively easy. Trust me on that. There's this thing that once you kill an enemy, after a certain while, they'll just get the fuck back up and just be alive again, unless you like burn them with a special like thing, but you get like free through the entire game. So it's like you basically have to pick your enemies to fight. Two problems. First off, enemies are weirdly easy to kill. Secondly, enemies stay down for way longer than they really should. Because once you kill an enemy, you might as well just count them out for good. Because it takes like so insanely fucking long for them to get up that you might as well not bother. And so you basically just choose like maybe like one route to take out like the enemies in during on that one route, and then just circle around constantly so you can always like swap your items, and it kind of becomes monotonous in a sense. But nevertheless, the game manages to keep a sense of unease at worst and be terrifying at best. It has really good bosses as well. Well, it has alright bosses. Admittedly, the bosses are a little weak, but it's really good. They're pretty fun. Not very difficult, maybe a little annoying at times, but they're good enough. They're serviceable bosses with the mechanics they got. They do a fun job. Um, Puzzles. Now, this is a game that actually has some good puzzles in it. It has better puzzles than Resident Evil at this point. There's like one particular puzzle that is so fucking hard, even the devs think it's so bloody hard that they just give you the solution to it if you like want to give up. I had to. I fucking gave up because I sat there for like 10 minutes and I was like, fuck this shit. I kind of I got taken out of the experience. It stopped being scary, and it started to approach that annoying point. So I just decided to read the note they put next to the puzzle to say like, hey, this is what you do if you think this puzzle is bullshit. So yeah, the puzzles are really fun in this one. I like it a lot. A lot of exploration to do. A lot of there's a lot of combat. Weirdly enough. So you have fun with that, and the style of I think this game has its own video game engine, and this engine, honest to God, is one of the best looking ones. It's not trying to be hyper realistic. It goes for this like pixel graphics look, kinda, but it's such a fucking beautiful engine. It's hard to put it into words. Like the lighting's so fucking good, and it does reflections well. It does it's just the lighting really well, and the cutscenes look so fantastic. Oh God, I really wish I want to see more games with this engine. Basically, there's even points in the game where you in like a first person view, and I can see some really fucking sick first person horror games with this engine. So yeah, hopefully either the developer makes more games with this engine or makes it like available to the public or something. So yeah, but getting back on track, it's a really good game. Has some annoying gameplay mechanics, but if you can overlook it, if you really like the old type of Resident Evil games, you'll absolutely love this. The Lovecraftian stuff gels well together. The story is a little bit. I got the best ending, And I looked at the other endings, and if you don't get the best ending, you'll definitely be kind of upset with the ending of the game. I have to be honest with you. So I'd suggest you either hope that you'll get a good ending, or you'll look up tutorial on how to get the good ending, because it does this very evil thing where there's a bunch of like arbitrary shit that if you do or don't do will determine what ending you get. Okay, getting off track, so I'll just move on. Spooky's House of Jumpscare. I think it was yes, it was originally called Spooky's House of Jumpscare, I think, but they because they got like a cease and desist from someone, they had to rename it to Jumpscare Mansion, which is a little stupid and bullshit. Uh, it's a really good horror game. Its concept is basically that you go through 1,000 rooms, and literally 1,000 rooms. There's no fucking bullshitting around it. It's not like, haha, you only have to go through 100. We were joking. No, you're gonna be walking through 1,000 fucking rooms. But it does a really good job of keeping the horror going because, like, I think even as early as in the first 100 rooms, it like introduces monsters you have to run away from, and each of them have unique mechanics to us to combat them. Well, not literally combat them, but it basically allows you to not die. So yeah, like for one, basically clips through everything, so you have to carefully plan out your escape so you don't get like cornered by it. There's another one that basically you have to look at, otherwise it fucking snaps your neck. So yeah, stuff like that. It has really cool sections in it that are like that are like scripted, but are really scary. And it does a really good job of mixing boring, monotonous gameplay with spooky elements and horror. It's really fun. The DLCs are definitely worth the play because they're basically just they kind of ditched the 1,000 room concept and just straight up do horror, but even the base game is really fun. So definitely play it. It's worth a replay every once and then. The Swapper. I think this is a highly underappreciated one. Um, it's probably because it's a fucking puzzle game. It only has puzzles. So if you're not into that shit, you better get the fuck out. Cause there's no combat, there's no real horror elements. It kind of has like some spooky-ish elements, but at its core, it is a philosophy. The story is basically like a philosophy question of. Okay, I'm not even gonna go into it. Just play the fucking game. And the main gameplay loop is doing a bunch of admittedly fucking hard puzzles. I didn't look up a single one of them in solution because the main gameplay is very unique. You can like control a bunch of like little things you can spawn in and then swap between them, and you have to like fucking figure out puzzles that way, and it's really cool. It also has a really interesting style, an extremely unique aesthetic that I'm not even sure what it's called. I think there's a genuine term for it that it mentions in its description, but I think it's like a thing where they use real life objects and they like scan them in or something. Uh, you play it for yourself. It's a trust me, it's worth the play. And for fuck's sake, don't just always play FPSs and shit. Sometimes it's good to give your brain a little exercise and have a good old puzzle game, like a proper one. Solve like a difficult puzzle without relying on the internet. Just go at it for like hours until you solve it, and you'll be very proud of yourself. You'll improve your knowledge. Um, I'll leave this one for last because that's easy to talk about. Wasteland 3. This one I played pretty recently, and I have to come to the conclusion that it's kind of a shitty game, but not that shitty because it has a really good like story element to it. But the problem is the game goes on for too fucking long. It overstays its welcome by a lot. I actually never gonna finish the ending. I think I literally gave up at the finish line because I cannot be bothered even knowing that. Uh, the game is very well written. It is completely voiced, but the combat is boring.
The missions are very unique. I'll give it that. They're all very fun and once again well written. But the problem is you'll basically be combating shit a lot, and the combat is kind of boring. And I come to the realization that if you don't do the side content, the main story content will absolutely fucking pound you to the ground. Cause I did every side content in the game, and even with that, some of the fucking bosses, well, not even the bosses, just regular encounters, were pretty brutal. So, on looking back on it, if I didn't do the side quest, I would have given up quicker because I would have been just crushed to paste, and that wouldn't have been fun. But yeah, it's not even that the combat is very fun. It's that it just goes on for too long. That's its main downfall. Honestly, it is a little too much stuff in it. Like I just couldn't be bothered to fucking be stringed along with the game's bullshit. Uh, but if you have more patience than me, you'll definitely have a fun time with it. And if you don't mind turn-based combat and stuff like that, you don't mind very dialogue-heavy shit, then honestly, it's it's probably gonna be a favorite game. One thing I do want to mention, it's a really fucking buggy game. Like I had to completely restart the game on multiple times uh, because I encountered like a bug that didn't allow me to move or interact with some shit that I had to interact with. So it's a really buggy game, and it's been out for a while, and shit hasn't been fixed, so it's never gonna be fixed. So also be prepared. Prepare your patience for that as well. You know, uh, make sure your willpower is ready for that. Now, the ultimate Spider-Man game, fucking best, motherfucking G. It is the best game, best Spider-Man game, hands down. Best game of all time, hands down. It's probably one you don't know because it's like a really fucking niche game from like the PS2 era that I played on the PC. it's um it's basically like the first ever Spider-Man game I ever played. I think if I think about it, it's genuinely the first Spider-Man game I have ever played. So I'm willing to recognize there's a lot of shit in that game that actually there's some stuff in that game that is really shitty, but all in all, it's I think it holds up because I played that game enough to remember its combat in and out. And while it's not very difficult, it is really fun. And at times it can be pretty difficult. Like there are sections that uh, are require you to be pretty skilled and have a good understanding of what you're supposed to do. The bosses kind of range from really shit to weirdly really fucking good. Like surprisingly, not weirdly, really fucking good. In my eyes, it might be the perfect game. There's so many stuff that shouldn't be good is really good. Stuff that should be good is really, really, really fucking good. But in a realistic, realistically, it's it's probably more of a fun to play than do yourself a favor game. Uh, because there's a lot of stuff to like, but there's also a lot of stuff to dislike. So yeah, uh, it might be kind of a hit or a miss. It's very stylistic, surprisingly so. Um, but I said that word a lot. I guess I really like stylistic games, don't I? I guess I get attracted to very unique looking things. I like games that look unique. That's for sure. Um, so yeah, I don't think it's worth too much of a mention because I am looking at that game with rose tinted glasses. It's like no matter what I say, I'll probably just end up praising it. It's worth a play. I in all honesty, even if I aren't just like gloating about it, even then, I genuinely think you should give it a chance and just play it at least once. I think you'll end up playing it a lot more than you think. It's a weirdly long game, and it's weirdly fun, and has a lot of really cool and difficult boss battles as well. So yeah, that's my tier list. These aren't all the games I've ever played, but this video is already tiring me out to the core, and it's probably what how long have I been recording? Um, Over an hour. Fucking hell. No wonder I'm tired. So this video will never fucking be watched by anyone ever. Um, yeah. So I hope I gave some insight on these games. Probably disagree on a lot of it, or didn't understand what I was going on about because I was just rambling out of my ass. But hey, I made a video, so that's cool, right? Yeah, right. Bye bye. End of recording. I want to go sleep. Bye now. Bye. Bye bye.